That Tuesday started the way bad days usually do, with something small going wrong before I even got my coat on. The Go Transit app told me my usual train was delayed 40 minutes. Signal issue somewhere outside Oakville. I stood in my kitchen, holding my travel mug, and doing the kind of math that makes your stomach drop. Delayed, train, plus downtown meeting. At 9 meant I needed to drive, find parking, and somehow not walk into the Zoom room that I was physically present for, looking like I had just jogged 5 blocks. Which, it turned out, I had. I parked 2 streets over from my office on King West, because the lot on Adelaide was full, and by the time I got inside, I had 12 minutes to spare, and enough adrenaline to last me until lunch. I needed coffee. Not the stuff from the machine in the break room that tasted like hot brown disappointment, but actual coffee. From somewhere that had a name written in chalk above the counter. There was a place I had passed maybe 20 times on my walk between the parking lot and the office. Fieldwork Coffee, one of those narrow storefronts that had probably been a dry cleaner once, now outfitted with reclaimed wood and pendant lights, and a small chalkboard listing the seasonal drink. Pear and cardamom latte, $6.50. I had never gone in, because I always had enough time to grab something from the cart near the lobby, and habit is a powerful thing until the cart guy takes a Tuesday off. The line inside was 4 people deep. The space was quiet in a way that downtown spaces rarely are. Before 9, just the sound of the grinder and someone typing near the window, I got in line and checked my email, which was a mistake because one of my clients had sent me 3 messages between 7 and 8 in the morning, and reading them made me feel like I was already behind, on a day I had barely started. I looked up when the line moved, and that was when I noticed her. She was 2 spots ahead of me. Dark coat, brown hair pulled back loosely, the kind of posture that suggested she had spent years making herself take up exactly the right amount of space. She was reading something on her phone with a slight frown. The kind of frown that meant she was actually thinking, not just scrolling. When the person ahead of her moved to the side, she stepped up to the counter and ordered without looking at the menu. Oat chai latte. Medium. Extra ginger. Her voice was clear and completely unhurried, like she had made this decision before she walked through the door. I ordered my Americano, and then, for a reason I still cannot fully explain to anyone including myself, I said, "And I will get hers too." The barista looked at me. I nodded toward the woman who had just stepped away. The woman in the dark coat. She had heard me. She turned around. Her eyes were dark and she looked at me the way someone looks at an odd piece of furniture they are trying to place in a room. Not unfriendly, just measuring. "You do not have to do that," she said. "I know." "Then why?" I did not have a good answer. I had gotten approximately 3 hours of sleep, and my train had been delayed, and I was about to sit through a 90-minute call with a client who used the word synergize without any visible shame. I had no business being generous. "Because you ordered like you knew what you wanted," I said. And I found that impressive at this hour. She stared at me for 1 full second. Then she said, "That is a strange reason." "I know," I said. She looked like she might say something else, then did not. She picked up her chai when it came up, held it with both hands, and went to a table near the window. She opened a notebook, not a laptop, an actual paper notebook, with a pen clipped to the cover, and started writing. I took my Americano, and left feeling like I had done something slightly embarrassing, and also slightly right, which is a confusing combination at 8:47 in the morning. The meeting was fine. My client used synergize twice. I took notes with one hand, and drank my coffee with the other, and tried to focus on the work, which I was good at, even when the work felt like it was somebody else's life. That was the problem. I kept circling those days. I was 31. I had a decent apartment on Dovercourt. I worked in project management for a mid-sized tech firm, and I was competent at it in a way that had started to feel like a warning sign. When you are competent at something you do not love, Nobody asks you to stop. I went back to fieldwork on Wednesday. I told myself it was closer to the parking lot than the lobby cart, which was technically true if I walked an extra block out of my way. She was not there. Thursday either. By Friday I was actively pretending I was not looking for her, which required more mental energy than I had expected. I ordered my Americano, stood at the pickup counter, and looked out the window at the street like a man who was simply appreciating the architecture of the financial district. On Monday she was there. Same table. Same notebook. She was writing when I walked in, and she did not look up right away. I ordered my coffee slowly, not on purpose, and by the time I had paid she had glanced over once, and then gone back to her page. I sat at the table next to hers. There was not a lot of space in fieldwork, and it was the only open seat that was not at the counter, which was true. She looked up after a minute. "You came back," she said. "The coffee is good." She made a small sound that might have been agreement and might have been skepticism. "I am Avery Walsh," I said. "I work 2 blocks over." She looked at me for a moment like she was deciding something. Then she said, "Joelle." "Just Joelle?" "For now." I nodded. "Fair enough." She went back to her notebook. I went back to my email. But something about sitting in that room had made the morning feel less like a machine running, and more like an actual morning. Joelle. She said it plainly, like the name was not up for debate. I came back Tuesday. She was there. I sat at the same table, and we talked for maybe 15 minutes about a bad piece of public art that had been installed on the corner of Bay and King. She thought it looked like a filing cabinet that had lost an argument. I said it looked like someone had asked an algorithm to design optimism. She laughed once, short and genuine, and then looked mildly surprised that she had. The next 2 weeks built the way slow things do. Not dramatically. She was at fieldwork most mornings by 8:30. I started arriving around the same time, which required leaving my apartment earlier than I usually did. And I told myself that was about my own schedule. We talked about things. Not big things at first. She mentioned a meeting that had gone wrong, in a way where everyone was technically correct. And the outcome was still a disaster. I told her about the client who said synergize. She seemed to find that genuinely offensive on my behalf, which I appreciated. She had opinions about things that she expressed directly and without hedging, and I found that I kept asking questions, just to hear how she would answer them. I learned she was a policy consultant. She worked with municipal governments on housing files, which meant she spent a lot of time in rooms where people argued in good faith about things that mattered and still arrived at conclusions that helped no one. I told her that sounded exhausting. She said it was useful, which she said the way some people say it is fine, meaning the opposite of fine is not the full story. She grew up in Sudbury, moved to Toronto for her master's degree at Ryerson, stayed because the work was here. She lived somewhere near Bloor West Village, but had never told me exactly where, and I had not asked. I learned that she always ordered the same drink, that she kept a paper agenda, even though she also had a calendar on her phone, that she did not like ambient noise, but did not mind the specific noise of a coffee shop because, she said, it was the sound of people being productively alone together. I thought that was an exact description and told her so. She said she had not invented it. I said she had said it well anyway. She did not take the compliment, but she did not deflect it either. One morning, she asked about my work with the same directness she applied to everything else. "You said you are good at it," she said. "Do you want to be?" I looked at her. That is an uncomfortable question. I know. That is why I asked it. I thought about it honestly, which felt strange because most people who asked about my job wanted the short answer. I told her that I had gone into project management because I was good at seeing how pieces connected, but that the pieces had started to feel like they belonged to someone else's puzzle, and I was just the one holding them. She stirred her chai even though it was already mixed. "That gap," she said, "between what you are good at and what you want, It does not close on its own. Annoyingly accurate, I said. I know. For someone I have known for 2 weeks. She looked at me. I did not say I just figured it out. I did not know what to do with that at the time. I let it sit. One Friday at the end of October, she mentioned a public consultation event happening that evening. City planning meeting about a new transit corridor proposal. She was presenting a section of the community impact report. You could come, she said. If you want to see what the work actually looks like. She said it the way someone might mention a film that was showing nearby. Not an invitation exactly, more like leaving a door slightly open. I went. The meeting was at a community center in Parkdale. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a projector that took 11 minutes to connect to the laptop. About 40 people attended. Most of them residents who had very specific feelings about the proposed stops. Joelle presented for 20 minutes. In a room that was not easy to present in, because 3 people near the back were talking to each other. And someone's child was running laps around the chairs. She was calm through the whole thing. She answered questions directly, passionately, and without performing patience, which is different from actually having it. When a man near the front challenged one of the community impact figures, she did not soften her data or apologize for it. She explained how the methodology worked and why the number stood. Afterward, people came up to ask follow-up questions. I stood to the side and waited. She was thorough with each of them in a way that made it clear. She took the questions seriously, even when they were repetitive. When the room had mostly cleared, she came over and said, Well, I said, what did you think? I think you are very good at something you called useful. She looked at me for a second. Then she said, Do you want to get dinner? There is a Thai place 2 blocks over that does not make you wait 40 minutes for a table. We ate, pad see ew, and split a pot of jasmine tea, and stayed for almost 2 hours. She told me about her father, who had worked in mining administration in Sudbury for 30 years, and had a very precise sense of what things cost, and how that had shaped her. She said she had learned early that most problems were not complicated, they were just expensive, and that people who pretended otherwise were usually the ones without the bill. I told her about my parents, who had moved to Mississauga from Halifax before I was born, and ran a small renovation contracting business until my dad's back made that impossible. I told her I had watched them hand manage every invoice and client call from the kitchen table growing up, and that I had spent my 20s trying to get as far from that level of uncertainty as possible, which was why I had ended up in a stable and not quite right job. She nodded in a way that said she had heard the thing under the thing. What would the right version look like? She asked. I do not know yet. That is honest. It is also inconvenient, I said. She smiled, the one she gave when something was closer to the truth than she had expected. We split the bill. I told her she did not have to do that. She said she was aware of that, which I recognized as the answer I had given her about the chai on the first morning. And I did not try to argue. Outside on the sidewalk, the air was cold and clear the way Toronto air gets in late October when the wind is coming off the lake. I asked if she wanted to share a cab back east. She said she had a bike parked nearby and would be fine. Good night, she said. Good night, I said. She walked away in the direction of the parking rack, and I stood there for a second longer than I needed to. The following week she was at fieldwork every morning. So was I. The conversations were easier now in the way that things get easier once a threshold has been crossed. She was drier and more specific than before. I found myself thinking of things to tell her between mornings, which was its own kind of information. On Thursday she mentioned a gallery opening in the Distillery District on Saturday. A friend of hers had a few pieces in the show. I will be there around 6, she said, not looking up from her notebook. I said I might stop by. She said okay and kept writing. I was there at 5:55, which I was not proud of, The gallery was warm and full, in a way that made it easy to move slowly. Her friend's work was large-scale textile pieces, deep blues and greens, and they pulled attention from across the room. I found Joelle near the back, talking to a woman I did not know. She introduced me as Avery, the man from the coffee shop, which I found both accurate and oddly public. The evening moved the way those evenings do. We drifted apart and back together, separated by conversations, reunited near the wine table or the windows. At one point, a man she knew started a long monologue about property values in the annex, and she caught my eye over his shoulder with an expression that was extremely controlled and still unmistakably pained. I moved in and asked the man a question about commercial zoning that redirected him entirely. She extracted herself cleanly. "You know about zoning?" she said when we were alone. "My dad was a contractor," I said. "You absorb things." She looked at me for a moment. "That was useful." "See," I said. "I know what that word means now." She laughed. A real one this time. We left together around 9. The distillery was quiet by then. The cobblestones slick from earlier rain. The old brick buildings lit low and steady. We walked toward the streetcar stop and I did not rush. And neither did she. At the stop she turned to me. "Do you want to come back to my place for a bit?" she asked. "I have good tea and a considerably worse couch thatch than you probably expect." I said yes. Her apartment was in Roncesvalles, third floor of an older building, with a creaking elevator and a radiator that clanked in a specific rhythm. She said she had stopped noticing. The place was ordered in a way that was not minimal. It had books and things on the walls and a small collection of plants on the windowsill that looked genuinely alive and cared for. The couch was fine. She had been underselling it. We sat with mugs of black tea and talked until close to midnight, about the gallery, about her friend, about what it meant to make something, and put it in a room, and hope it found the right person. At some point the conversation turned to the city itself, which she loved in a complicated way that I recognized, the way you love a place that costs more than it gives back but gives back enough. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. "Same time Monday?" she said. "At fieldwork," I said. "Yeah," she nodded. "Good night, Avery." I said good night and took the elevator down and walked to the Queen streetcar in the cold and felt something I had not felt in a long time, which was that the morning was going to be something I looked forward to. Monday I arrived at fieldwork at 8:25. Her table was empty. I ordered my coffee. I told myself she was running late. I sat down, opened my laptop, and answered 3 emails with less attention than they deserved. She did not come. Tuesday was the same. Wednesday I walked in and already knew, but checked the window table anyway. Thursday I sat there long enough that the barista, a young guy with a wool toque he wore indoors, asked if I was waiting for someone. I said no. He nodded like he did not believe me, which was fair. I replayed the door of her apartment. Same time Monday. She had said it like it was already settled, like it was a plan, not a suggestion. I had not imagined that. I was reasonably certain I had not imagined any of it. On Friday afternoon my phone buzzed. No preamble. Just, "Arbor Lane 7 p.m. if you want." I looked at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "I'll be there." Arbor Lane was a wine bar on Dundas West that I had never been to. The kind of place, with small tables, and a list written on paper, that changed often enough that you did not bother memorizing it. Joelle was already there when I arrived. She was sitting at a corner table with a glass of water in front of her, and her hands folded on the table, and she looked, for the first time since I had known her, like she was not entirely sure what to do with herself. "Hi," she said. "Hi." I sat down. The silence between us was not the comfortable kind. I waited. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You owe me a Monday morning," I said. "But go ahead." She looked at me directly, which she always did, but this time it cost her something. I pulled back because I got scared. She said it plainly, without softening it or reaching for a more palatable word. I am not used to things that I have not thought through in advance. And somewhere around Thursday night at my apartment I realized I had not thought this through at all. And that felt dangerous. I leaned back. What does thinking it through look like for you? She paused. I ran a project last year, municipal consultation for a rezoning, that affected about 4,000 households. I spent 8 months on it. Every stakeholder, every data point, every possible objection, mapped out before we went to a single meeting. And it still went sideways in week 2, because the ward councillor had information I did not. She looked at her water glass. I do not like not having the information. So you disappeared for a week? Yes, because I was information you did not have. Her jaw tightened slightly. That sounds worse than I meant it. Tell me how you meant it. She picked up her glass, set it down. When I was 17, my mother co-signed a loan for a man she trusted. He was charming and reliable, and she had known him for years. He left the country and she spent 4 years paying off a debt that was not hers. She said it like she was reading from a document. I watched her do that. I watched her trust something that felt right and pay for it with time she did not have. I decided I would not do that. So you vet everything. I research what I can, she said. I do not go into rooms unprepared. I looked at her. And me? She met my eyes. You were not what I expected you to be after the research. I went still. What research? She held my gaze and did not look away. Your firm was mentioned in a policy brief I was reviewing about private sector project management. I looked up the company, and your name was listed as lead on a community partnership file. I read a few things. A LinkedIn post, a short interview. You mentioned your morning routine in it. The train, the walk, the coffee cart. I could hear my own breathing, and my usual cart guy was not there that morning, I said slowly. So I needed somewhere else. She nodded once. The route from the train station to your office passes. Fieldwork, she said. You picked that table, I said. Yes, the window table, so she would see me come in. Yes, the chai, I said. That was you. The order is mine, she said quietly. I do drink oat chai, but yes, I knew you would hear it. I sat with that for a moment. The whole first morning rearranged itself. The way she had not looked away when I caught her eyes. The way she had not been surprised when I came back for my jacket. The way she had said, you came back, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I had thought it was just that she noticed things. She did notice things. She had started before I walked in the door. You knew I had come back those days, I said. Because you were watching. She was quiet. You could have said something, I said. Any of those mornings. You could have told me. I know. But you did not. No, why? Because it had already become something else, she said. And I did not know how to explain the beginning without losing what had come after it. The waiter came. We ordered without reading the list. When he left, I looked at the candle on the table and tried to figure out what I actually felt, which turned out to be several things at once, which is not useful when you are sitting across from someone waiting for you to speak. What you did, I said finally, is not something I can just set aside. I know, you built an entrance. You decided who I was before I had a chance to show you. She did not argue. I did. And then you were not that person, and I did not know what to do with that. I told her things then, more than I planned to. I told her about a friendship I had walked away from in my late 20s, because I found out the whole thing had started as a favor to someone else. That the first 6 months had been one person doing another person a social favor by including me, that it had turned into something genuine, and I had still not been able to get past the beginning. I told her that was not a quick story to untangle. She listened without filling the silence. At one point she put her hand over mine, briefly, and then moved it back, like she had done the thing before she could stop herself. We stayed until the wine bar started to empty. When we finally walked outside, the night was cold and quiet, the way Dundas West gets late on a weeknight. The neon signs of the closed restaurants reflecting off the damp concrete. She stood beside me on the sidewalk with her hands in her coat pockets. "Before you decide anything," she said, "there is one more thing." I waited. She exhaled slowly. "I knew what coffee you would order. I knew your train line and your approximate arrival time, and that you preferred places with counter seating. I walked into fieldwork with a plan." She paused. "And I have never once, in all the years of doing this kind of preparation, had the plan stop being the plan so quickly." "What stopped it?" I asked. "You did," she said. "When you said I looked like I knew something you did not. That was not in any article, and I did not have an answer for it that was strategic. I just wanted to keep talking to you." "Write it in the comments," she added quietly, like she was talking to herself. Was I wrong to feel like the beginning mattered, or does it stop mattering when everything after it was real? I did not answer that night. I said I needed a few days, and she said that was fair. She did not try to argue me out of it. She took the streetcar west, and I walked to my car and sat there for a while before I started the engine. For the next 2 days I did my job and thought about her constantly, and tried to figure out which part I was actually upset about. The planning or the keeping it. Both, I decided, but not equally. The planning meant she had wanted to meet me before she met me. She had looked at a paragraph in a document and decided I was worth engineering a coincidence for. That was strange. And also, if I was being honest, not entirely without a certain kind of weight to it. Nobody had ever done anything like that in my direction before. Most people met me and moved on. The keeping it was harder. Every morning I had walked into fieldwork, thinking the whole thing had been thinking chance, thinking the first look had been accident, and she had known it was not. She had watched me come back and say nothing. That was a lie of omission that had lasted weeks. But then I thought about Thursday night at her apartment. I thought about the way she had said she had gotten scared. I thought about what it must have cost a person like Joelle to say that plainly across a table at a wine bar to someone she had reason to believe might walk away from it. She had not needed to tell me. That was the thing I kept returning to. She could have kept it and I would not have known. Instead, she told me at exactly the moment it was most likely to cost her everything. I called her on Sunday afternoon. She picked up on the second ring. "Fieldwork," I said. "Tomorrow morning." There was a pause. "Okay," she said. She was already there when I arrived. Window table, no laptop, no notebook. Just Joelle, sitting with her hands around her chai. And for the first time since I had known her, she looked like she had not entirely prepared for what came next. I sat down across from her. I ordered my Americano when the server came around, and then I looked at her. "What you did with the beginning," I said. "I am not saying that was nothing. It was something. It made me question every conversation we had going backward." Her hands tightened around her cup slightly, but she did not look away. "I need you to understand that," I said. "It is not a thing I can explain away." "I understand it," she said. "And I also need you to know," I said, "that I have been coming back to that coffee shop since the second week because of every conversation that happened after the first one. Not because of how it started, because of what came next." She was quiet. "You closed your notebook the first morning I sat down," I said. She looked at me. "Yes, you did not have to do that. No, but you did." "Yes." Her face did something then. Not a dramatic shift. Something quieter, like a door that had been held nearly closed for a long time moving slightly on its hinge. "If this continues," I said, "I need to know what I know. I cannot be managed. I cannot be the variable in someone else's risk assessment." "I know," she said. "I am serious, Joelle." "So am I." She reached into her coat pocket and set something on the table between us. A small piece of paper folded once. I unfolded it. She had written 4 words in her precise, unhurried handwriting. "No more running the numbers." I looked at it for a moment. Then I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket. We sat together at the window table with our drinks while the morning moved around us. The barista called out orders. Someone near the door laughed at something on their phone. Outside on King Street, the TTC ran past, and a woman walked by with a stroller and a travel mug and the expression of someone in the middle of a very full day. I did not know yet what we were going to be. I was not sure Joelle did either, and I thought that was probably the first truly unplanned thing she had sat with in a long time. But we were both at the table, and this time, we both knew why.